Nintendo!
Hey everyone, this is Chrono again. Welcome to my guide for Raszageth, the final boss in the Vault of the Incarnates raid on heroic difficulty. It's been a while. I hope everyone's been enjoying their time in the new expansion. I've been spending a tremendous amount of time doing Mythic Plus and raiding this past week, so I apologize for not getting this out sooner. This is the first video of the series that doesn't use footage from the beta. So everything you see here is what you should expect to see when you pull the boss on live. With that in mind, let's get started. This fight involves 3 phases with 2 intermissions. The raid will be traversing to various platforms beneath each of the imprisoned Incarnates throughout the fight. I'll be doing this guide a bit differently, and we'll be going over each phase individually. Phase 1 begins on the main center platform. All of the main phases will be single target against Raszageth herself, while the intermissions will involve adds. This is a decently long fight, so use Bloodlust on pull, and it'll be ready again for the end of the fight. The first mechanic that occurs shortly after pulling the boss is Static Charge, which picks 3 random players. After 8 seconds, these blow up for a large amount of damage to each of the selected players, and fall off damage to the raid, so make sure all 3 spread out. Drop 1 to the left, 1 to the right, and 1 behind the raid. This explosion leaves behind a static field, which slows you and deals light damage while you walk over it. Throughout the fight, the boss will apply Electric Lash on many players, dealing ticking damage and softening up your raid for incoming burst damage, so stay on top of keeping them stable. Right when these static charges explode, Raszageth will face a random player and use Lightning Breath, which is pretty much instant death if you don't react. Next up is Hurricane Wing, which pushes the raid back over 3 seconds. With the boss being tanked in the middle of the room, you'll need to stand in a static field to prevent being blown off the platform. If you're already standing in the field before the winds begin, you can completely prevent any displacement. So just step in and don't move until the cast ends. She'll do another set of static charges to keep your healers on their toes, followed by another breath. Throughout the main phases, you'll see swirlies all over the ground where lightning will strike. These aren't actually lethal, so don't work too hard to dodge them all. They do about 75k damage and do a mini stun, interrupting your casts. The tank mechanic for this fight is Electrified Jaws, which does a large amount of physical damage, followed by a moderate amount of nature damage. This leaves a debuff that causes the tank to take 100% more physical damage. Taunt swap after every use of this ability. Right after the breath, she'll do another knockback. You'll want to get out of the static field and spread out immediately, as everyone in the raid will be affected by Volatile Current. Don't overlap your circles, and when these expire, it'll spawn a Volatile Spark next to everyone that will attempt to cast Burst. If any of these go off, it'll do about half of your raid's HP and damage over time. You can survive 1, but any more will likely lead to a wipe. Interrupting or CCing these in any way will immediately destroy them. But on Heroic, destroying the orb will spawn a second one, meaning that everyone has to deal with stopping 2 burst casts. Most classes have multiple ways of dealing with this. These orbs will instantly die to interrupts, knockbacks, knockups, displacements, fear bombs, purge, mass dispel, ring of peace, the list goes on. Right after you've cleared them out, another set of static charges go out, followed by a pushback into a breath. When the boss hits 65%, the RP for the first intermission begins, and your raid will have to split into 2 teams. Divide everyone evenly and get into position on the southwest and northeast sides of the main platform. The boss will knock everyone over to the side platforms, where you will have to deal with adds. There are 3 Surging Ruiners channeling AoE damage on the raid. These come with an Absorb Shield that, once popped, will spawn an additional wave of smaller adds. During this intermission, Raszageth will repeatedly sweep across the platform with a lightning breath that will do an intense amount of damage, insta-killing anybody caught off guard. Someone on each platform should be keeping a watchful eye for this and calling it out. She seems to randomly pick a platform for her first breath and then alternate sides each time. Kick any casts of the Storm Bolt from the Acolytes whenever possible, as this will be the main source of random burst damage on the raid. Throughout this intermission, 2 random ranged players will be picked at a time with a circle that pops for a light amount of damage. Take these away from the melee stack. You'll want to kill the Ruiner that's next to the teleporter last, so the left team will be moving counterclockwise, and the right team will be moving clockwise. Once all 3 Ruiners are killed, take the portal to the upper left platform, where Phase 2 begins. At this point, you'll see a Vault Integrity meter at the top with 50% remaining. This will slowly deplete throughout the phase and will be the gauge for how much damage you need. You have a finite amount of time to kill her in the final phase, so it's important that you get her low enough here, ideally somewhere close to 35%. The very first thing Raszageth does is gain a massive shield and starts dealing raid damage that ramps up over time. Everyone will receive either a positive or negative charge and must stack with matching colors. If you come into contact with anybody of the opposite charge, you'll do a burst amount of damage to everyone near you. While you're surrounded by matching charges, everyone in the stack will do triple damage and healing. You have 25 seconds to get into the right stack and break her shield, or she wipes the raid. Soon after, she'll use Tempest Wing, which sends out a ring pushing everyone away while dealing moderate damage for every second that you're running against it. We had a lock portal set up to immediately bypass this damage. She will then apply Fulminating Charge on 3 players. These targets are greatly slowed and need to spread out on the edge of the platform. Anybody that gets hit will also receive the same debuff, but with a smaller ring, so it's your responsibility to get out of the explosion since they're moving a lot slower. Raszageth will follow this up with a set of Volatile Sparks. So clear out the sparks like you did in Phase 1 and get ready for Tempest Wing. The boss will gain a second shield and Storm Surge once more, so deal with this as you did before and break the shield. You'll get another set of Volatile Sparks, followed by a push, into one last set of Fulminating Charges. He'll do yet another Tempest Wing, but you'll be able to use the Lock Gate once more to ignore the damage. The boss will do one final Storm Surge. Once you break this, the Vault Integrity will hit 0% shortly after, pushing you into the second intermission. This takes place on the same platform, and your raid will need to manage DPS between 2 adds. Tanks should be on opposite sides, ready to pick up one of the 2 Colossal Storm Fiend adds that spawn in. The first thing these do is spew out waves of Ball Lightning, which do a moderate amount of damage as well as do a brief mini-stun. While you're dodging these, the boss will sweep across the room with a Lightning Breath, so make sure to keep an eye on where she is throughout this phase. The Storm Fiends will cast Storm Break, teleporting across the room and leave behind a wave of small adds. These adds will attempt to reunite with the Storm Fiend. You should focus AoE and use CC to prevent this. The big add will heal for 5% for each one that reaches it, as well as gain a damage buff. If the small adds ever reach max energy, they will become immune to CC, so get rid of them fast. The 2 Storm Fiends need to die at around the same time. Otherwise, the remaining one will deal ramping raid damage until it dies. Hopefully at this point, your raid has survived playing dodgeball and avoided each of the breaths. Everyone should stack up at the bottom right of the platform to get knocked back onto the original platform, where the final phase of the fight begins. The edge of this platform is covered in a ring of electricity, which closes in on the raid as the phase progresses. The boss will need to die shortly after the entire platform is covered. The tank mechanic now changes to Thunderous Blast, which fires a lightning beam through the tank that deals nature damage. Shortly after, this will cause an explosion around them that deals less damage if you mitigate the initial beam. A random player will be picked by Magnetic Charge, which does fall-off damage and pulls the entire raid to their location. Right before this explodes, Raszageth will pick a random target for a Lightning Breath, so whoever has the bomb needs to be ready to react to prevent pulling the raid into their death. 3 players will then be picked for Fulminating Charges, so they will need to try their best to spread out. The boss will then do a Tank Blast, followed by a raid pushback, so have a lock portal ready to nullify the damage. Raszageth will then do a Tank Blast and another Magnetic Charge. Your exhaustion debuff should be expiring around this time, so plop it and go ham on the boss. 3 players will be picked for another set of charges, but since the majority of the room is now covered in static fields, you will have to run out into it to prevent spreading. Raszageth will do one last breath into a Magnetic Charge into a raid-wide pushback. After gathering in the center, this is where you'll make your final stand and finish her off. If you've made it this far, Congrats on achieving AOTC for the Vault of the Incarnates. Thanks once again for dropping by for another video guide. I might be doing guides for some of the mythic bosses, but they'll likely only be for the later encounters in the raid. With recent news regarding the Dragonflight roadmap, we may be seeing info for the next raid sooner rather than later, so I look forward to seeing you guys there for the next series of PTR raid guides. I hope you found this video helpful, and wish everyone a Merry Christmas. See you guys next year!